Hey guys, so this is the part 2 of my understanding functions series. So the first video is on understanding SE, and today I'm going to talk about understanding TI, which is actually my tertiary function. I'm an INFJ, so I use introverted thinking, and I'm gonna make the video short because I realized that I have been making like way too long videos in the recent few videos. So I'm going to make it short so that it would really help with understanding functions in a concise manner. So I think TI is a function that a lot of people misunderstand because right now I feel like um, generally society is a lot more focused on emotions and feelings, and as a result, TI is often kind of made to take a back seat. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why that is actually not a good idea because we really do need balance in society. And so TI is very, very misunderstood as a function. And I want to kind of clear up the misunderstandings with this video. So first of all, how do you define TI? Like how is it used? Like what is it like as a function? I found this really good definition on Twitter. So I'm gonna read from it. It's basically from this Twitter user called Rio Gusta, and her definition of TI involves the analytical process, prioritizes precision, accuracy, and logic, very critical of generalizations, problem solving, investigative, diagnostic, dismissive of that which does not hold up to logical examination. So I find this to be a very, very good and accurate kind of, overview of what TI is about. TI is about analyzing a situation and looking at it from a logical standpoint and to pinpoint kind of the problems, the logical fallacies within someone's argument. So you see TI used a lot in debate settings. When debaters have to talk about an issue, they often use TI to kind of point out the flaws in the opponent's arguments and to explain why their argument is better. TI is not just great on a debate stage, it also has a lot of users in real life. So this is not like talking about all like non-TI users, but I do see a tendency that people who do not have TI or have a very weak TI, for example, ESFJs and ENFJs with TI as the inferior function, they tend to be a little like I would say gullible sometimes. Like they tend to see things from a more like emotional perspective, which is not to say it's not a bad thing, but when you don't have TI to guide you, when you don't have a strong TI to kind of help you on your journey, like in real life, you can actually get uh, like believe things very easily in a sense. And because TI is the logical kind of support that helps you to question things, like question what people tell you. People with very weak TI, with undeveloped TI, they tend to not question. So whatever people say, like if it feels a certain way, if it makes them feel react in a certain way, they would see that as the truth. But because they don't hold certain things to a logical examination, sometimes they tend to be basically lied to, and they may not realize that they are actually being manipulated because the TI function is not strong enough. And this is also applicable to functions, to types with like weak T function in general. So for example, I noticed that with ENFPs, so TI is actually their polar function, which is a socionics term for a function that they're least familiar, the blind spots. So definitely ENFPs and ESFPs have that blind spot, and they also tend to sometimes have the problem of not being discerning enough when they get like information from others. They're not able to analyze the information for themselves, and they just take it as it is, which it can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing because we work, like every function has its use in the world. So one example that TI is really good at is to find out, like, who is scamming you. So for example, when I was younger, a lot of people tried to kind of make use of my money in a way. Like there are like some kind of there's some cult groups like in church, and also some kind of like pyramid schemes and all that. And they typically target young people because young people are more impressionable and more like emotional, so they kind of use a lot of I guess like tactics in the emotions department. Like they try to talk about their stories, like try to make you feel bad for them, or tell you that joining the organization can transform your life. um, and there's a lot of like touching stories of people whose lives are transformed. But because of my strong TI, I'm able to actually see what's going on, and the fact that a lot of people are manipulated into putting a lot of their money into something that doesn't really, it doesn't really add up. Like the amount of money that people invest in them doesn't really translate to actual like stuff. Like you don't know where the money actually went. And so I realized that my TI actually helped me a lot in my younger days when it comes to like just knowing when someone is being disingenuous, knowing when someone is actually trying to emotionally manipulate you. And just being able to see, like being able to analyze the situation and see like the underlying motives of people. And obviously that is also because of my NI, so it's kind of like they're working in collaboration. um, I think another use of TI is that it really knows how to think of solutions to things. So, typically when a TI user hears someone talking about the problems, they try to find a solution. So that may feel like a little annoying to some people because they are like, I don't need you to kind of give me solutions. I just want someone to listen to. But on a more like, I guess, societal level, that is actually very important because TI is able to pinpoint the flaws, the flaws that they see in maybe an organization or a movement, or the just kind of what people sometimes sugarcoat or don't dare to voice out. TI is very, I would say it's like a very courageous function in a sense that it really dares to talk about what people don't want to talk about or people don't feel comfortable talking about. But sometimes it's necessary because if you don't identify the problems, you're not going to find a solution. So one common misunderstanding that people have about TI is that they feel like, oh my god, TI is like being so critical, like it's always pointing out flaws, it's not friendly enough. But the point that they miss is that sometimes we need that. We need to talk about flaws in order to work on them. So another example that I can give with TI is, in some of my other videos, I talk about like the flaws or what I don't like about certain types. And obviously my intention is not to like shame them, but to just let people know, there are certain unhealthy traits that people can exhibit, like that certain types can exhibit. And obviously those are in situations that anyone can be in. So any type can be unhealthy, but they can have different types of unhealthy traits, if that makes sense. So I gave the example of FE being very people pleasing, not being true to yourself, kind of going along with the group and being disingenuous. That is the sign of an unhealthy kind of use of FE. And that can be a problem because it really can affect your close relationships when you're not being honest and when you really try to go with the group too much. You lose touch of your own identity, and so you rely on other people's opinions too much, and you don't really construct a strong like inner self, I guess. And for FI, I also talked about the flaws. Like for an unhealthy FI user, he or she tend to not be able to see other people's needs. And so it can come off as very self-centered because other people's needs are just not within their I guess, awareness, like they are only looking at their own needs. So like the reason I said that is because I want to be able to get people to notice, the potential problems with their own personality and maybe things that they have been doing subconsciously that are actually a problem to others. And so I think TI as a whole is really, the intention is to get people to really look at things that they are doing wrong so that they can improve on it or make some changes when necessary. So when it comes to, on a societal level, TI is also useful in that area. And, even though it doesn't feel good to talk about, the flaws or the pitfalls or, the issues, and it can actually offend some people because they don't want to talk about certain things that make them uncomfortable emotionally. But I would say that at certain times it's actually really necessary, and it is actually dangerous not to talk about those things. To bury them under the carpet is actually worse, because then you never address it and it just, it kind of decays on its own. So to bring up one example, I will always use the example of, like volunteerism. It's a very popular activity. People go to volunteer on when they're also like a tourist in some countries. And then but then I realized that there are actually a lot of criticism of the movement. I mean, it's not really a movement, it's just a popular thing for people to do, because a lot of people are pointing out that, these people are not really helping out, like they are not really bringing long-term like benefits to the communities that they want to help out. And I do see some truth in that statement. um, so people who are kind of invested in this like volunteerism, like it's almost like a fad at this point. You have to also notice that there are actually a lot of issues with this type of volunteering, because a lot of people just end up making very short term changes, or almost like no change. They just interact with the community and maybe help them paint the wall, and then after they leave, it's like nothing has changed, So that is also like an example of how TI works in society, basically to point out like, how things can be improved. Like, a lot of things that are popular may not actually be that good. And I think TI is very, very independent in a sense, because it is about your own views and not about what other people think. Um, Obviously, it can be used in a healthy manner if someone completely neglects other people's views, and only think about his or her own views. But I think that, as a society, we have to be, when we learn to be more tolerant, we also have to learn to be more tolerant of people's views. And so, we have to be able to understand that TI is something that really is about that one person's views. So you cannot expect people to all be like, oh, we live in harmony and so we all need to have the same view. Sometimes TI can come across as very jarring in a conversation. For example, if everyone feels a certain way and then TI's user suddenly say something that, may seem offensive because it is a very different way of looking at the world. It is a very analytical perspective and may potentially bring out the flaws in something that you never really thought was wrong. But I think that as a society, we need to really look at the usefulness of TI in fixing problems, in bringing like issues to light, in bringing buried issues to light. That is actually a very important element of society, in order for society to be able to bring in different perspectives. Because if everyone else is like all about harmony and all about like, oh, I agree with you, I agree with you, then how do you actually have a discussion? How do you actually have a valuable, discussion if everyone thinks the same? If everyone is like, oh, I agree with you, I feel so like, emotionally impacted, but then you also have the logical aspect that you have to use, because You know, we cannot do great things with just one function. We cannot do great things for the world with just one perspective. Like, we definitely need people to be emotional, you know, we need people to be empathetic, but then I think that we also need people to be logical, to be able to see the problems or see the potential problems and bring out a more, you know, diagnostic, like, maybe even harsh, right? Maybe even harsh views in order for people to kind of see other um, perspectives and to really examine, you know, um, how things work in this society level. So that's all for this video. So this is my understanding of TI. The next video is going to be my understanding on the FE function. And so I will see you again soon.